Have you heard this one? There's a pretty wild theory making the rounds online that the US government has this secret plan to just erase its massive national debt using crypto. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But today, we're going to dig into where this incredible claim came from, and you might be surprised to find there's a tiny grain of truth hidden inside all the fantasy.
First off, let's just try to wrap our heads around the number we're dealing with here. $37 trillion. That is an astronomical figure. You know, if you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you more than 100,000 years to burn through that much cash. It's a number so big it almost feels fake. And yeah, it's the kind of thing that keeps economists staring at the ceiling at night.
But imagine for a second, what if there was a button? You know, some kind of high-tech magic trick that could make all of that debt just, poof, vanish into thin air. Well, that's the dream at the heart of this really fascinating and surprisingly popular internet theory.
Now, this isn't just some random comment buried in a forum. Oh no, this has become a full-blown theory that the US is secretly gearing up for a crypto reset to completely wipe its financial slate clean. It's a heck of a story. So let's get into how this whole thing even got started.
So where in the world did this idea come from? Well, it seems to have started at an economic forum over in Russia. A Putin advisor makes this really bizarre claim that the US is planning to move its debt into something he called a crypto cloud. Okay, from there, big names in the crypto world kind of picked it up and ran with it, and before you knew it, social media just exploded. Suddenly, everyone was talking about a total financial reset.
So why did this theory get so popular? Well, honestly, because it sounds really complicated and smart. It throws around all these real financial terms, stablecoins, blockchain, digital assets, and it weaves them into a story that feels, well, just plausible enough to believe. It's really the perfect example of this old saying, if you can't convince people with facts, just confuse them with jargon.
All right, let's hit pause on the theory for a second and get back to reality. We need to start with the most basic misunderstanding that this whole idea is built on. Because, you see, the national debt isn't at all what a lot of people think it is.
So, the US debt isn't just one big number sitting in a government computer somewhere. No way, it's actually a gigantic collection of legal contracts. We're talking about Treasury bonds, notes, bills. These are all legally binding promises to pay back money to investors, to other countries, and even to regular people, like you and me, with interest. These are ironclad agreements.
And right there, that's the fatal flaw in this whole theory. You can't just move these legal contracts to a crypto cloud. That's not a real thing. It would be like trying to pay your mortgage by texting a picture of cash to your bank. The system doesn't work that way. It's not a file you can drag and drop.
So if a crypto magic trick is completely off the table, how does the government actually handle this mountain of debt? Well, it uses a much older, much more traditional, and very, very real tool: inflation.
Let me break it down with a simple analogy. Okay, imagine someone loans the government $100 today. Now, over the next few years, the government creates more money, and the price of everything, gas, groceries, you name it, goes up. When it's time to pay back that loan, the government gives back the original $100. The promise is kept. But that $100 now buys a lot less than it used to. So the debt was effectively shrink, not by deleting it, but by repaying it with weaker, devalued dollars. This isn't some secret conspiracy. It's just basic economics 101.
Okay. But here's where things get really interesting. This is where that old playbook is getting a serious modern upgrade. And this is where crypto, specifically stablecoins, actually comes into the picture. Just not in the way the conspiracy theorists claim.
So what are stablecoins? Well, they're a type of crypto that's designed to hold a steady value. They're basically digital dollars. And how do they stay stable? Well, they're backed by real-world assets. And a huge chunk of those assets are US Treasury bonds. In other words, they're literally backed by US debt. So when people all over the planet use these digital dollars for savings or for trade, they are, without even knowing it, buying and holding US debt.
And here's the kicker. When the US inflates its currency to help manage its own debt, that loss in buying power doesn't just hit Americans anymore. It quietly and digitally spreads to every single person around the world holding those dollar-backed stablecoins. The US basically gets to export its inflation now more efficiently than ever before.
Okay, so now that we get the real mechanism that's at play here, let's just do a quick lightning round and tear apart the most popular fantasy claims from this theory, one by one. First up, the crypto cloud. As we've covered, this is just pure gibberish. It's a meaningless buzzword somebody made up.
It's not a real financial tool. Remember, debt is a legal promise, not a JPEG you can upload to the internet.
Second, this whole idea that the US is going to sell its gold to buy a bunch of Bitcoin. Look, that idea didn't come from the US Treasury. It's an opinion pushed by a major crypto advocate. And that so-called strategic Bitcoin reserve you hear about, it's just a stash of crypto the government seized from criminals. There are strict laws that prevent them from just selling it off like it's their piggy bank.
And third, this claim that the US is using private companies as some kind of backdoor to secretly buy up Bitcoin. It's an interesting conspiracy for sure, but there is zero hard evidence to support it. At the end of the day, it's nothing more than pure speculation.
So let's just boil this all down, shall we? The myth is this dramatic, high-tech crypto reset that makes trillions of dollars of debt magically disappear. But the reality? Well, it's a lot more subtle, but maybe even more powerful. It's using the classic old-school tool of inflation, now supercharged by the global reach of stablecoins, to spread the burden of that debt across the entire world.
So you see, this isn't about some crazy reset of the entire financial system. It's about using brand new technology to play one of the oldest games in government finance, devaluing your debt through inflation, but now on a global scale more efficiently than ever before. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other old tricks are going to get a high-tech makeover in the years ahead?